A very good morning to you. You are watching Y in the Morning only on Y254 channel, and I am Ndavula. And with me in studio today, Monday being politics, my favorite day of the week, we have in studio one Dr. DR.Ndavula from St. Paul's University. He is the head of Department for Communication Studies, and with him today is one Dr. Wafula as well from Post-Colonial Networks, which is a knowledge activist organization that has the borderless press that publishes books. And today we are going to have an inside look into the book that DR.Ndavula has written, which is called Social Media and Political Campaigns in Kenya, which is basically an examination of the communication that happens during the election campaigns periods, traces and emergencies and evolutions in the campaign social media presence. Say good morning to people.
Good morning, Hilda.
Yes.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Yeah.
Good morning. Thanks for having us this morning.
All right. Let me first start with John. We would like to understand why you feel it is important for us to understand media and politics, social media and politics.
Thank you. Actually, when politicians practice their trade, they have to reach out to masses, talk to them, influence them, and all that is done through communication. And they've done that over the years, either orally or using technology. So that's why it's important for us to understand technology and how it is used for political communication.
All right, I see. All right, thank you. Dr. Wafula. Yes, the Post-Colonial Networks, you say, is a knowledge activist organization. Can you please enlighten us a bit on what that is?
Yes, so Post-Colonial Networks started out of the understanding that we have a knowledge imbalance in the world. The latest statistics show that the African continent as a whole, which has the largest population compared to other continents in the world, only produces 2% of the world's publication of all the books that are produced. So at Post-Colonial Networks, looking at those statistics, we were appalled and came to an understanding that something needs to be done, because the reality is that books tell stories, books transmit cultural values, and eventually influence policy and institutions. So when you look at it from that perspective, you realize that our institutions, our cultural values that people get out of universities with are foreign values. And so we started Post-Colonial Networks to kind of begin looking for doctoral students and professors who have written doctoral theses and publish them into books, so that we can counter this pipeline of European and Western books by also having African scholarship being part of the currency of education.
Okay, Dr. Ndavula here is part of the 2%. Why is it that only 2% publish their work?
There are a number of factors. So let me just mention a few. The reason why the outside world publishes more than African scholars is that many African scholars, when they finish their doctoral programs, they get absorbed into the work market. Most of the PhD people end up in teaching, and they are overloaded with the teaching load. Unlike Western scholars who get writing as part of their schedule. So you will find out that probably Dr. Ndavula teaches 4-7 classes at St. Paul's, as compared to a North American equivalent of him who will be teaching 2 classes, and the other time is allocated for writing. So that contributes to these scholars having no time to write. Secondly, the writing publications, most publishing companies are also Western controlled and Western managed, and they also have a bias, and so they tend to give privilege to scholars who are writing from the American or European continent as opposed to African scholars, because this narrative that has gone on for so long is that the African continent doesn't have people who are smart, who are intelligent. And so if I am a publisher in the US and the UK, if I see Ndavula name with a project before me, I'll put it aside, If it's Peter Rogers, I will give that a privilege. And so through that process of discrimination, a lot of even scholars, African scholars who send their projects, they end up being rejected or stalled in the pipeline. Then there's the question of money. You know, to research and write requires money, and the publication requires money too. And you know, again, compared to West outside scholars, African scholars operate on very tight budgets, and oftentimes it's hard to choose between buying bread and writing a book and paying for it. So Borderless Press comes in to kind of like now allow scholars like John to write without having to pay in advance any money. We don't charge our scholars to pay any money. We offer free training to the scholars so that they get that training to write. So every year we come to some African university, gather together people and encourage them to write.
Then let's talk about now Dr. Ndavula over here, who has broken the ice and decided to do a book. You've based your book on the 2013 elections to 2017 elections. Why did you feel that this is the book we need right now, and why did you feel like we needed to know what happened in terms of social media presence in the year 2013? What did you feel about the elections that the social media part influenced a lot?
Thank you for that, Hilda. Actually, as I said before, politicians, it's like they play the game to media. You know, like media is the arena where they play. Now, if you look at the history of Kenya, in 2007 to 2008, when we had the post-election violence, we had communication technology, mostly radio and SMS, being accused of fueling the tension and the election violence that resulted from it. So for me, that time I was living with the community in the villages, and it was a tranquil place, a place I'd grown up. But when the post-election violence came, it really disrupted our society in a major way, and most of the people who were affected were the youth. And then there was lots of misinformation, you know, and so on. So technology wasn't used in a very good way. So when I began doing my studies, my master's and PhD, I thought, how can we use communication technology to firm up our society so that we don't go back there? And also discovered that politics, you know, whether you like it or not, plays a huge role in our lives. You know, the people who sit down and say, I don't care about politics, but that time it was, you know, it was brought to the fore that you know, whatever politicians do matters in our lives. So when I began doing my studies, then I began looking at information and communication technologies and their effect on, you know, political communication, electoral violence, and so on. So in 2013, you know, whereas in 2007 maybe it was the radio and SMS which were at the forefront, in 2013 I estimated that it would be social media. So I began looking at how politicians would employ social media to campaign. And that time it was a new thing. It was not everyone was on social media. And on the flip side again, I found out that some of the vices in our society, you know, corruption and so on, happen because politicians are pushed to use a lot of money when the election cycle comes, you know, and they need to campaign. And so I was also thinking, could social media be a medium which is cheap, but by that time it was quite cheap, which could allow politicians to still campaign, still pass their message, but in a very cost-effective manner. Because if you look at again the resources that we deploy during elections, they're huge resources. So I think those two issues, the electoral violence and also corruption, issues tied with money or expenditure during campaigns, were my motivating factors.
Interesting. So you do believe that social media can actually be used to cut costs when it comes to campaigns, if used properly. There's something very interesting you mentioned called electronic democracy. Can you let us know what that is?
Okay, now if you look at the traditional media, let's say radio and, you know, television or even newspapers, these are very closed mediums. You know, like you have you know, a producer, editor, you know, everyone has to check your story and so on. And sometimes not everyone's story gets told, you know, because of this gatekeeping process. So not everyone's voice, especially during electoral campaigns, gets heard. Now, if you look at the Constitution of Kenya 2010, we had the devolution process. So, you know, very many levels of governance. And that means that, you know, an MCA needs to campaign, a women rep needs to campaign to reach out to people, MPs and so on. So we had so many people who are campaigning at the same time and whose voices need to be heard. But if you look at the traditional media now, not everyone can have a voice, you know. And if you look at now social media, it almost like gives everyone a voice. You know, you can go online, post something, you know, get followers, whether you're a politician, whether you're not, whether you're a new person coming in, whether you are a citizen, you know. So that's what we call electoral, I mean, like electronic democracy, yeah. Because everyone has, social media gives everyone a voice, an equal voice, you know. Just depends on how vocal you are.
All right, all right. You also mentioned that it has its payoffs and its obvious losses incurred when everybody has a voice. What do you think is the downside of everybody having a voice, and what do you think is the upside of everybody having a voice?
Now, everyone having a voice, it's a good thing in a democracy, you know, because then you have a choice whom to listen to. There's no one dictating to you whom you should listen to, you know. So everyone having a voice is a really good thing. But throughout history, any new media that comes, you know, if left unchecked, you know, could be avenues to propagate hate, you know, violence and so on. So I think the only downside to everyone having a voice is now, you know, tampering this with some ethics or media ethics, which not everyone has, you know. So that's where our electoral, I mean, or just the laws, media laws, come in. And unfortunately, on social media, or even just technology in general, it moves faster than, or there's faster development than we can lay down the laws. Yeah. So it's like we always play catch up to media, especially media tied to the internet in terms of regulation and so on.
All right, you also mentioned that it is something that is likely to change. There we are seeing Facebook and Twitter being used now to campaign. Whatever we saw in 2017 is likely, according to you, is likely to change maybe in 2021 or 2022. Yes. What are these changes that we can expect? Because you also mentioned the diffusion of innovations theory, how this society adopts to different technologies. Can you let us know what changes you expect?
Actually, if you look at like 2007, as I said, mostly it was the radio that was being used and maybe social SMS back then. And there's so many studies which were carried out about the influence of SMS. And everyone thought now the SMS would be our downfall. Well, it did shake up the society at some point. Then in 2013, we had just social media, mostly Facebook and Twitter, emerging. And back then, remember my research is based in 2013, we found out that Facebook was a more popular medium. Twitter was more elitist. You know, few people were there because...
Oh, that's true.
because of the brevity, you know, using only 180 characters and you have an impact, you know, the hashtag and so on. But then when it came to 2017, we found that Twitter almost caught up with Facebook. Actually, I didn't say Facebook began going down a little bit, yeah.
It did, yes.
But in 2022, perhaps it will be WhatsApp, perhaps, or something akin to that. But basically, what you're finding, what we're thinking about is that going forward, citizens will have more of a voice in terms of organizing, you know, political campaign fundraising and so on. Like even right now, all these technologies. Let's say in the US, for example, they've been used very effectively to mobilize people and also to raise campaign money. But in Kenya, although we are using all this social media, we haven't gotten to a point where, let's say, we are raising funds. Maybe that's the next thing, or mobilizing people to actually go and vote. So I'm thinking perhaps going forward, we'll master more these technologies and use them more effectively for campaigning, not just, you know, like in 2013, we had people who had so many followers, but this didn't translate into votes.
Yes.
So I think people will be more, make more professional use of this media to have real impact on the ground.
So you believe that now it will become more professionally used, not just
Yeah. From my research which I carried out in 2013, I found out that there's some politicians who are actually engaging, professionals to manage their Twitter accounts, to manage their messages, and so on. And even some PR firms were involved in this. And in 2017 again, many more people did this at various levels, not just the presidential level, because at the presidential level it's clear that they do this, but then this is likely to cascade down. Yeah, and it's a good thing because most maybe communication graduates now will get jobs. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. But I would like to understand, in your book you said that you're going to talk about how you felt about the candidates' behaviors online. Based on the 2017 elections, is there anything you can say with regards to how our candidates behaved online that triggered you to also maybe give us a bit of some juice of what we can expect from that chapter?
Okay, in that chapter, basically when you're engaging online, we have 4 techniques, of campaigning online. There's informing, there's involving, there is connecting, and mobilizing. When you talk about informing, this is just like giving people information. Now, at this rally, these are the number of people came, you share the photos, and that's all. So just passing information. So involving is where, you are on social media, and the people you're reaching out to, can even connect back to you. So there's a call-in line perhaps, there's an email they can send you, they can find more information about your campaigns and so on. And connecting is now when, the supporters themselves, connect with each other, and they're able to do things, so they reach out to each other. Think about the Salams Club, when people are greeting each other on radio and someone is sending their salams to Shoto, Mnyololo, or whoever, they're connecting among themselves, and that creates a force. And finally, you have mobilizing. So these people, when they're able to connect, and they're able now to mobilize each other to actually turn up and vote, or even they on their own, they can print campaign materials, support you, send money, and so on. But what I've seen so far is just informing, so most of us at the level of just passing information and not actually making a meaningful connection with the voters in a way that can translate into votes.
All right, Dr. Ndavula, why don't you let us know a bit about why Post-Colonial Networks believes in this book? Why do you feel that people need to understand social media and politics here in this country, Kenya, as an African story?
Right. So Post-Colonial Networks, as I said earlier, is an activist organization. We are deeply concerned about issues of social justice, equity. We want to make sure that people can live holistic lives. And if there are any gaps that compromises people's freedoms, people's rights, we want to be a part of the movement that can address that. So when Dr. Ndavula wrote his project and forwarded the proposal to us, and we had our editors read through.
What about for you individually? What was so captivating about Dr. Ndavula's work?
I think I was captivated with his thinking in terms of how social media can transform society in terms of making it a much more democratic space than it is. In his book, he also, talks about how social media in many ways is restricted to these elitist politicians, and he kind of wants to take a step further and make it an instrument for even common people and citizens who matter when it comes to voting. And so for me, that became my catch point to get captivated with this book. The idea that if people, common people who vote and who have the power to put somebody in political roles can understand social media and can use it for their own benefit, not for the benefit of just politicians who sometimes tend to be look out for their own interests.
Yes.
Then that will create a better Kenya in the long run. And I think also just to think about social media in terms of how it not only influences getting people into office. But I think his thinking goes further than that to talk about how social media can get bad people out of office. So if you have people who are socially aware and can converse across groups, across genders and political divide, and create a consensus where people can say, we elected so and so, but I don't think this is what we wanted out of him or her. What can we do about it? And that political process that can engage redressing people who are not serving the interests of the people that elected them. I think that's powerful. So coupled with the laws of maybe in the future, laws can be created that can allow people to be recalled. That is awesome.
You
So
also had another formula of how to deal with that redressing people, which you had spoken about earlier, about fighting the bad information with the good information. Tell us a bit about your theory on that.
yeah, so I think John mentions this, and it's extremely important. He talks about how social media can be used for the good, but can also be used for the bad. And oftentimes, I think in our earlier conversations before this show, you talked about how most people are drawn to negative social media usage than to positive aspect of it. And so, whereas social media is good, it can also, create political upheaval. And so, for me, I think, and which is the philosophy of post-colonial networks and borderless press, which is that if there is so much negativity and so much that is retrogressive, the only way to counter that is to create more stories that are progressive, that are positive. And so, if you have many people who become socially aware in terms of all the available social media outlets and can use that positively, then they become a counter force to this exclusive group of people who may use it negatively for their own gains or whatever groups that they support.
All right, Dr. Ndavula, let me slide back your way. What do you say about this retrogressive social media patterns in your book?
Now, first of all, we have to try and understand history, because all new media, every media was new at some point, including writing. Maybe just to maybe tell you this, like there's this legend that says there's this king, Chinese king, who, when writing was invented, he banned it in his kingdom, saying it will make people stop cramming things. So for him, cramming things was, so every new technology is disruptive, But for me, I think we shouldn't really focus on the disruptive part of technology. It's about how we counter that, as Dr. Ndavula says. You can't stop technology. You can't even if you try. You can put laws, tax people like what you're doing in Uganda and so on. But if its time has come, it has just come. It's for us to see how best we live with it. So for me, I think it's for people to maybe would I say love the country more, think about the future generations, and even when we campaign or talk, have these political debates in our society, let's not just think about the here and now. Let's think about the larger effect that our communication has on the societal fabric. Yeah.
All right. As a parting shot, what would you like to say to the audience about your book that we might have left out that they need to catch up with?
Yeah, and I think we need to buy this book, read it. It's new thinking, it's current thinking about technology and political campaigns in Kenya. All of us, we know, like in Kenya, we have this phenomenon called the permanent campaign. Like elections ended just early this year or something like that, but we're now campaigning for 2022. So that's a new phenomenon. The permanent campaign. So let's engage with this book and we'll learn more about these current times that we're living in. Things are changing; they're not the same. We have a current generation of voters who are just born with the internet. Let me say that. So all they know is the internet. So And I'd also talk about that. We call them digital natives. I also mention about that kind of
digital
voter.
natives.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. So we can read about all that in my book, and let's see how we progress as a society in terms of our politics, communication, and a stronger society.
All right, all right. What about you, Dr. Ndavula? Do you have any parting shots?
Yes, I think I would say that Borderless Press and post-colonial networks, organizations that are doing good. They're doing good work. We have started to make inroads in Kenya, and we want to kind of spread out to other African countries. And I think I will encourage people, and we do not publish just academic books. We publish even popular books, stories and storytelling, novels and things, poems and things like that. And so I will want to urge people who want to publish and don't know how to kind of get in touch with us. They can just go to postcolonialnetworks.com. Then they will get my contacts. Or Borderless Press, and then they will see what we do, and if they want to contact us, that will be great. We will work with them to help bring their voice out and get it published.
All right, Dr. Ndavula, this being your first publication, yes?
Not quite. This is, I would say, this is the fully peer-reviewed publication.
Okay.
But I have 5 other books that I wrote for schools and colleges. But this is important because it's fully peer-reviewed, meaning, you know, scholars in my field have looked at it, given me comments, and I've incorporated those in my work. Yeah.
All right. So what do you have to say about people who say that Kenyans don't read, and maybe that's only 2% want to publish?
Well, I think the reading culture in Kenya is really changing, and I think technology is aiding that. I see so many people nowadays with e-books.
Is it going to be available electronically?
Yeah, it is available on Kindle. If you go to Amazon, you can find it either the hard copy or the digital version, which is quite the digital version, which is quite affordable. Yeah, so I encourage people to read, and I know the reading culture is slowly improving, so we'll get there.
All right. Thank you guys for coming so much today.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hilda.
All right. You guys don't touch that dial. You are watching Why in the Morning on Y254 channel. I am Hilda Wadidi. And in studio today, we have had an inside look into the social media adoption and campaigns in Kenya by the Dr. Ndavula and Dr. Wafula here in studio. Do not touch that dial.